I know.
You would love him. He's hilarious.
All right, I think we're ready. Oh, we're filming as we speak.
All right. I would like to call the May 2nd, 2019 City Council meeting to order, and I will provide the opening. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to gather here this evening in such favorable circumstances. We're grateful for the freedom that we enjoy in this land, and grateful also for those who have fought and served to ensure that we have those freedoms. Please help us as important issues this evening, that we will be given judgment and wisdom, and please bless all those who have sacrificed their time to be here. And these things we pray in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is a presentation by Nathan Rich, the director of Wasatch Integrated, and they are where all our trash goes. So this should be interesting. So Nathan, do you want to step up?
Thank you. Is it okay if I roll a little bit?
As long as you speak into a mic. You can. I think you can detach that.
I'll do it. Mayor, City Council members, thank you for having me. I apologize for the length of this presentation, so I'm going to rip through it pretty fast. I've had a little practice at it, but because I'm going to move pretty fast, I just printed a copy with the notes on it.
Thank you.
So, stop me if you have questions. And oh, look at that. So, how's that? Stop me if you have questions. I don't like a mic, but I understand you should use one if you're given it. Maybe I'll have more voice left when I'm done. My name's Nathan Rich. I'm the executive director of Wasatch Integrated Waste Management District. We are. Are you guys? Does that focus to you? I'm not wearing glasses, so focused enough.
That looks a little
Enough.
fuzzy.
It's never really great.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the district, and I'm not going to tell you what we're going to talk about because you'll see that. Quickly, we're a special service district, so we're owned by 2 counties and the 15 cities that we serve. So basically all of Morgan and Davis counties, with the exception of Bountiful. We handle, our job is to take care of your municipal solid waste. We handle about 300,000 tons of annually. We currently serve about 300,000 residents. So as an engineer, I'll help you with the math. That means each one of us generates about 1 ton per garbage of garbage. That this number is actually gone up over the last decade or so as we have become more affluent and are a little bit more of a consumer society. So we're always talking about and trying to do the right thing, yet we're a consumer society. We currently have about 37 full-time employees, and a year ago that would have been 87. And the change is with the closure of the energy recovery facility. We laid off about 35 full-time employees with the closure of that facility. And then, of course, we're governed by a 19-member administrative control board on which your mayor sits. I am not going to read our mission statement in front of you. I would just point out that sustainable, cost-effective solid waste management is important, but also treating waste as a resource, pursuing best available demonstrated technology. We want to do things that are forward-looking, and also within our mission statement is promoting public education of the programs that we're running. So our name is Wasatch Integrated Waste Management District. One reason it's that is because it used to be Davis County Solid Waste Management and Energy Recovery Special Services District. I will point out that although a residue is the least preferred method of handling solid waste, it is really important that every system have an environmentally sound liner with a landfill in it, because recycle, reduce, recover as much as you want. At the end of the day, there will be non-recyclable. It's really the foundation of every system. Integrated solid waste management, there's not a right or wrong necessarily. The way we measure that in the industry, we talk about landfill diversion. So how much waste of what we're generating are we not putting in the landfill? Waste is local, so solutions are local. An example of that is the waste-to-energy facility that we've operated for the past 30 years was built where it was because of Hill Air Force Base being there as the energy customer to buy the steam we were producing. As we look at how we're going to handle our waste, we actually have to realize that of aluminum pulled from a recycling load actually came out of Farmington. And this, I'll point out to you what makes this Davis County waste. And it's right here, and it's right here. In that entire thing, there's 2 beer cans. In most communities, that would be 90% beer cans. Most communities would have more aluminum in their waste, which is one of the highest dollar recyclables. So my takeaway is we should drink more beer in Davis County.
Got it. We like our Diet Coke.
So lacking that, what we need to do is understand what our waste looks like and other regulations. Climate is a big issue along the Wasatch Front. In fact, I would say much more of an issue than solid waste. So our integrated system for the past 30 years has consisted of the energy recovery facility, the landfill, which continues to be the foundation of our facility. We have at the landfill citizen drop-off facilities. You can come to the landfill, get in and out of that landfill safely and cleanly. We have at the landfill household hazardous waste and electronic waste drop-off at no charge to residents of the district. We've also recently opened and are now operating a fit and reuse. For years, we've watched people throw away. It's incredible what people will throw away, actually. So if you have an opportunity, come up. Tuesday morning is the prime time to hit the thrift store, because that's when all the stuff we pulled off the pad on Saturday gets priced and is out on the floor Tuesday morning. Right now, the green waste recycling and composting facility is the largest piece of the recycling that we do within the district. And historically, we've recovered metals from the ash from the energy recovery facility. And then we do have a landfill gas to energy project where we take methane off of the landfill, generate about 2.5 megawatts of power, ship the methane, and a contractor on the Air Force Base generates renewable energy with that gas. So for the past 30 years, this is roughly the system performance. We've been diverting about 50% of our waste from the landfill, which is actually pretty phenomenal performance, particularly for a conservative community like Davis County. I want you to keep this picture in your mind, and we'll get back to it. So what's changed? What's changed is a year and a half ago, we closed the waste-to-energy facility after about 30 years of operation. It was a hard decision, but asking to purchase less steam from us, which meant that our steam revenue at about $5 million a year would have gone down substantially. So we were also facing a large capital budget, more pollution control equipment, and in this airshed, that's, I think, also an important consideration as how we were looking at handling our waste. So we were looking at short-term borrowing, about $5 million, and we proposed a rate increase of about $3.50 to keep the facility open, and the board made, I believe, the correct decision and decided to close that facility. But it did operate for 30 years. It processed 3.5 million tons of solid steam, which offset natural gas that the Air Force would have otherwise. So we I think, honored the reason that facility was built. One of the most important things that facility did was extend the life of the Davis landfill, and not just by diverting waste from the landfill, but by giving the district the time to develop the level of sophistication to put some of these other projects in place. When I came to the district 20 years ago, we had 20 years of life in the landfill. Today we have about 20 years of life in the landfill, and that's because we've had time to re-engineer the facility. So why is the difference? For a couple of things. And the big thing to understand, we closed the major asset of our district, and most people didn't notice that. And the reason they didn't notice is because we had the Davis landfill, and it was there to give us operational flexibility. We just moved waste into the landfill. Actually, it's helped our bottom line to a certain degree. The problem is we've gone from 35 years of life in that landfill to about 20 years of capacity. So we're looking at ways that how do we provide that flexibility to this same system moving forward rather than just filling the landfill up. The other thing it does is it gives us, beyond system flexibility, extra planning. I don't know if anyone remembers the windstorm in 2012 or December 2011.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Great.
December 5th, I think. I can't remember, but so it gives us the ability to support the community and those sorts of things. The other thing that's interesting is we want to operate that landfill for a long time, so we continue to provide those customer service facilities, allow people to haul their own garbage on Saturday, that God-given right to go to the landfill with your dad, and you can't shoot anything anymore, but still. It's an experience. The green waste composting and those other supports, or those other fill at and above a certain tonnage, because it's fairly cheap and it's close, it helps provide some financial support of some of these other programs that we're going to talk about. Frankly, the landfill has helped subsidize the operation of the waste-to-energy facility for years because it's cheap to operate, but it's a really important asset. And the reason it's so important is because it's close to us. So it's much cheaper than the next landfill, because the landfill that we purchased an ownership interest in 2 years ago is 100 miles from us. So it's going to be much more expensive. So what now is three things: a transfer station. We're going to do some, and we're going to do some mixed waste processing that we'll talk about a little bit. Transfer station is currently under construction. It's actually at the site where the waste-to-energy facility was. If you've driven up and down Highway 193 lately, just east of the Air Force Base, and you look across, we've changed just the tipping floor of the waste-to-energy facility is still there. It's changed from tan with a green stripe to red with a white stripe. And then you can see the transfer station is just getting the roof going on this week, and it'll be finished within about a month. Really bad, but just to give you an idea, trucks back into the transfer station, dump waste on the ground, and then it gives us the ability to put more waste into large trucks, which then will go to a regional landfill for disposal. It also functions as waste that we want to process will go into an in-feed conveyor into the mixed waste processing facility. So it's sort of the receiving floor where we do some preliminary waste sorting and sets the stage. These are just some boring architectural renderings of what's now red. Anyway, interesting is we're talking, and we've been talking about this for about 4 years. Actually, we had some experience with this with the waste-to-energy facility because we put so much grass in our garbage cans in Davis County. We were having trouble combusting that waste because there are times of year when 50% of the waste coming from residential households in Davis County is actually grass. So we want to do a couple of things. We had some equipment we installed in 2015. We're going to reutilize that equipment. We're going to add some additional material recovery equipment, and the first thing we're going to do is pull out all the recycling to put it in a truck and haul it 100 miles and pay a tipping fee in a landfill somewhere else to dispose of that. So that's pulling out those things in the waste that are resources. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out that grass, and I'll show you some pictures of what that organic waste looks like. and we want to use that as feedstock in a anaerobic digester. South Davis Sewer is currently bringing an anaerobic digester online. They've agreed to take a part of that material. We're going to participate with them, hopefully, in the second phase of that digester, and we'll be making renewable natural gas with the organic fraction of the waste. This doesn't make communities because that waste usually only contains maybe 10% organic, but because we can't keep the grass out of our garbage cans, there's times when we're 50% organic. And then the last thing we will do is pull out the non-recyclable plastic, which is currently anything other than plastics number 1 and number 2. If it doesn't have a neck, it's not recyclable in today's market. And we have a project with GeoCycle and the cement plant at Devil's Slide. We're going to make an engineered fuel out of that non-recyclable plastic, and that'll go up to Devil's Slide. They'll use that as an engine. So these are all things where we can divert waste out of the landfill. I just point this out, and you can see in your handout, people ask me, well, and this has always been something that Kaysville's been interested in. Mayor Hyatt and I had several conversations about this. This is some waste sorts we did. The orange is households that have curbside recycling programs, and the red are households that don't have curbside recycling programs. So if you have a curbside recycling program, why would I want to go through your garbage and pull out recyclables? And the answer is we do a pretty good job on newsprint. This is in aluminum cans, and PET and HDPE are high-value products. There's almost no difference in the amount of those materials left in the garbage, whether or not cities have curbside recycling programs. So my answer is I want to go through that because there's enough value to warrant us going through that waste before we send it out. So we're going to process all waste. We'll also want to process the curbside waste delivered to us, and I'm going to touch on that at the end of the slide. So this is what that organic material looks like. We ran this pre-processed summer. The -2-inch material is 95% grass, and it's good feedstock for an organic digester. It's what it looks like in the fall when people are putting leaves in their garbage can. The engineered fuel is very simple. All we're doing is separating clean plastic and shredding it small enough that the cement kiln can blow it in.
Can you also mention about the mattresses?
So the engineered fuel is an interesting project, and thank you so much for reminding me. Our first project with GeoCycle, because this is going to be a year before we have this come online, and we were having some conversations about mattresses in our New Era meeting, which is the coalition that owns the landfill in Utah County, about mattresses, because Salt Lake County has been charging a fee for recycling mattresses and not recycling mattresses. If any of you saw that expose a couple of months ago, GeoCycle said, let's do mattresses. We have a shredder we're not using. And so we bolted the shredder down, and we've been shredding mattresses since December. We've now shredded about 8,000 mattresses, and we produce a fluff that's -2 inches. We pull the metal out. The metal goes out and gets recycled. Applied for about 6 months. They're really happy with that project. We implemented a mattress recycling fee in our board meeting last night, and in about a week we'll be charging $5 per unit, mattress or box springs, to recycle those mattresses. But the difference is we'll really be recycling those mattresses. And I think regionally we'll also pull in some additional mattresses to help support this partnership that we have with GeoCycle. So it'll actually blend with this, and it just needs to be light and fluffy, and they actually blow it in. They pneumatically convey it into their kiln, blow it into the kiln. That kiln operates at 2,000 degrees Celsius, and right now they fire that primarily with coal and pet coke, and pet coke is the dirtiest fuel on the face of the earth. Well, maybe an exaggeration. This is some of the equipment that we'll be repurposing that we used for a year. The front end of the equipment It's essentially, you can see the knives that rip the bags open, and we screen everything at 2 inches. That cleans the material up so that that's what the incoming waste looks like, and you can see the conveyor on the right. After it's gone through that trommel, things are opened up, liberated. We can present those to some recycling equipment. Okay, this is what the new plant looks like. And this is what, I'm going to remind you what our system used to look like. This is what our system looks like today. We got a whopping 7% landfill diversion rate. That's our green waste recycling program and a little bit of recycling we do at the landfill. This is not sustainable. That landfill will fill up in actually less than 20 years. We have odor issues with the landfill. It doesn't help us with that. It's not consistent with our mission statement. One of the biggest problems is when that landfill is full, there would be a very large increase, assuming that was all put on the first can, which it wouldn't be, but for comparison's sake, because we're talking about fee increase, we'd be moving to about $12 per month. Per option would be we build the transfer station and we just transfer half of the waste. It doesn't change our landfill diversion rate. This is a better solution because it gives us back that 35 years life of the landfill. It's a reasonable, low-risk, long-term approach. It helps us with our odor and traffic issues, but it's not still not consistent with the mission statement, and I think we can do better. This is the integrated system that we've been talking about, and you can see we're pushing now about 27% landfill diversion. In this base case scenario, we take the waste we would be transferred to the Bayview landfill. That puts us back at that 35 years of the life of the landfill. What's interesting about this is truly integrated because there's all these different slices to this pie, which gives us operational flexibility and makes the system more robust. This doesn't cost as much because we're generating revenue through the sale of recyclables. Less today than we will be when the recyclable market rebounds a little bit. And we're also, the biggest thing is by diverting waste from, if we compare that to the cost of hauling the waste to a regional landfill, there's this opportunity cost of about $30 a ton, which gives us some flexibility to do this. So, transfer station's almost finished. The mixed waste processing facility, we're actually hoping to execute a contract tomorrow or Monday. The project financing is in place. We issued a $20 million revenue bond for construction of this facility, and then the board, to underpin that revenue bond, we had an increase in the household use fee of $2 per month. Was approved in. We actually got a AA bond rating, which is pretty good for a solid waste system, smaller system bond rating, and that rate increase is effective July 1. Operation begins, or construction begins now, and we're hoping to be operational in the first quarter of 2020. So, the other thing I just want to point out, this is the processing facility. This is the old tipping floor. You can still see transfer station, and then also there will be some employee facilities. We'll be at about 45 employees to operate this facility, and the upper level of that new building is to educate 6,000 school kids through our facilities every year, so they'll be able to come in and look into the transfer station, and should be a nice package. So apologize for taking
that's fine.
20
and
minutes.
If you go to the previous slide, says household fee $2 per month. That's per can. So
It's correct.
if you have 2 cans, 3 cans, just multiply by 2. I don't want you to be
So what I wanted to mention,
Yeah.
and I know if Mayor Hyatt were here, that this is what he would worry about. The question was, well, so now you're going to go through, and I would say this, the recyclables you put in the recycling can will be cleaner and better quality recyclables. I would encourage you to keep your recycling program in place because it's better quality material. The other reason is politically, I think it would be really hard what we're doing is, it's like the waste to energy facility. Most people don't understand that it's there, and we're going to take care of it. So the question was, Kaysville, like some of our other cities, took the steps up front, did the right thing, put a recycling program in place. Shouldn't the other cities pay more for this program? So within the $2 increase, currently when the city delivers their municipal solid waste to our facilities, it comes in at no charge to the hauler, and it comes in under that current $5.20 per can. So when we increased the fee, we extended that same service to include delivery of the recyclable materials will come through the door of this facility for processing at no charge to your hauler, no charge to the city. So right now when your hauler shows up in Salt Lake at the material recovery facility, he's currently paying $45 a ton of recyclables. Now 3 or 4 years ago he was getting $15 a ton and the market has swung, but by having that delivered to our facility within the cost of the can fee, when the city goes out to bid on new hauling contracts, those contracts will compete strictly on the cost of hauling, and it'll take the hauler out of being that position of playing market buffer or middleman. And I know every city in the district got a visit within the last year talking about how, everyone, how terrible a recycling program is, how we need more money for the recycling program. So that will reduce the cost of your recycling can. And even with the $2 increase in your garbage can, if you need 2 cans, your recycling can will be cheaper than the second garbage can. So there's still value even as a consumer, as a household, if you're someone who needs 2 cans. And if you don't need 2 cans or don't want 2 cans, then we'll pull the dirty recyclables out of your can.
Good. Questions? Councilmember Barber.
Just kind of on that note, I think the best thing we can do is just education through our cities on recycling. I get lots of questions like what can be recycled, what can't be. How do you think the best way to communicate that information?
That's a good question. Being an engineer, that's always the part I've struggled with, is that public education part. In Salt Lake County, they've been working on trying to standardize a list of recyclable material. And one thing that's interesting so all of the MRF operators are pushing for cities to say, don't put plastics 3 through 7 in that garbage can. With the facility we're building, we actually want to see those plastics 3 through 7 because those are going to make clean feedstock for the engineered fuel product. But we can easily come up, and I did an article and asked cities to consider the larger facility, but we can work with your hauler to come up with a list of proposed items.
What about glass?
No. Glass
I ask that a lot.
Yeah, glass is a problem. It's very recyclable, but there's not a lot of value in it because glass is sand. Steel and aluminum, you have to mine and process so much ore that there's not an economic or an energy incentive to recycle glass. One of the biggest problems with glass is if you put it in the recycling bin and it breaks, it contaminates the paper and problems in the paper mills and makes the paper of less value. So buy aluminum, buy your beer in aluminum cans because aluminum can be recycled like 7 times. But they don't put pickles in aluminum cans. So.
Yeah. So what do you do with your glass? Just very carefully dispose
throw in the
of it?
garbage can.
Yeah.
We also have glass recycling locations. There's one by...
Is it recycling though?
It is.
Where do they take
and
that?
there is some glass recycling in the state, and it goes through Momentum Recycling in Salt Lake. And if you've been through Payson, just as you turn the corner on I-15, there's a corning plant, and you can usually see a little bit coming out of their smoke. Out of the glass at that facility.
Thank you.
And the drop-off locations over by the library, behind the library is one. And I think we have one more on the west side, if I'm not mistaken.
Barnes Park?
It could be Barnes Park. Yep. So if you want to recycle your
Yeah,
glass, take it
separate
there.
from the other recycling, but.
Thank
That's
you.
right.
Aluminum, steel, cardboard, plastics 1 and 2, anything with a neck, anything with threads on it is recyclable. Everything else, currently, there's no market for, but
Okay.
with this
But we
system,
can
it's going to
fluff
be a
it.
little more robust. So if
Yeah.
it's a piece of plastic, it's a garbage bag, I want you to throw it in there and we'll pick it
All
up.
right.
you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your
Thanks.
patience.
Okay. Any conflicts of interest to declare? No. Okay. We'll go on to our consent agenda. Would anybody like to move the agenda?
I'll make a motion that we move consent items A, B, C, and D.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments?
Make a substitute motion.
Okay,
We remove item B and C.
all right. Second for that.
Do you accept it?
He's offering a
Oh, a second.
substitute, so
Oh,
somebody would
I'll
have
second.
to second. Okay. Those who would vote in favor of that? Okay, any questions, first of all? No? Okay, let's go to a vote on the substitute motion. Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, let's go to B. Go ahead, Councilmember Adams.
Certainly, thank you. Just some questions on this topic. One, I guess we'll start with budget. This item, I guess we were told 110,000 of it. Well, first of all, the cost is around 300,000, just for those who are watching.
Correct.
It looked like 110,000 was coming out of general fund, $40,000 from the storm drain, and 70,000 from water, which is about 220, which leaves a shortage of about 80. But
Correct.
as I go through the budget, I cannot find the $40,000 in the storm drain category that it was actually budgeted either. So it looks like we're about $120,000 shy. I have the budget book
Right.
here with me.
It would be in there, item was submitted, so we can determine the code and get back on that, but that was in the submitted and approved budget as far as I'm aware.
Like I said, I've got the book here. It's, and I've got, I'm using the 2020 book because in the 2019 book, it was actually taken away. And we got some inserts, if you recall, Dean, to put into our 2019 budget book. And when the inserts didn't have the salt there. But then as I studied the minutes from the meetings, it looked like the salt was generally approved, or the salt shed was generally approved by the council. So perhaps we just never got a permanent copy back in our 19 book. But in our 2020 book, it does show the 2019 budget. And as I look in there in storm drain, so I'm a little concerned where that additional 40 grand will come from, on top of the deficit of $80,000 with or without the discrepancy of that $40,000 not being in the budget.
So that additional amount, as we put this out to bid, as we got back and looked at the proposal, there was an additional item for the erection of the building. As we started looking at that they recommended anywhere from 9 to 10 people for about 2 to 3 weeks for the erection of that building. With experience working on man lifts, that we weren't really comfortable having our employees perform the work. So that was about 60,000. And then in addition, there were items from the storm drain department as well as the water department, additional items that we wanted storage for in there. One being a sweeper, one being the vac trailer, as well as sandbag storage and other miscellaneous items. So we increased the size of the building that we bid out for the proposals, and have availability, and I can storm drain and water and provide that information, but that's where those funds would be coming from.
So you're saying you have availability for the $80,000 deficit?
Correct, yeah. So storm drain is going to bear the brunt of that because they were the largest reason for the size increase. So.
In the meeting when this was last addressed last year, it was discussed about bids and looking at other products. The product that you've put on the table here for people, it kind of looks like a Bountiful bubble,
Right.
generically some, bubble dome that the Olympic
Right.
committees will use for venues and whatnot. So that's what we're looking at installing down in the public works yard. What was the size again? It was like 80 by 120?
80 by 110.
So somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Okay. My concern is a $300,000 facility, and I know in that meeting there was arguments, or it was proposed that, hey, and I think it was theorized that we're not meeting state law with runoff. I have a little bit of a hard time or contention with that point because there's millions of tons of salt being distributed into the storm drain systems every winter in the state of Utah. So for me, for that point that it's illegal pile to be going into the storm drain, but I get that we're looking to make it easier to deal with our salt. Ultimately, this makes it easier for your department. But my concern is it's $300,000. And I think a pole barn, like I checked out what Layton does, and they have a 3-sided lean-to that suffices and does the job.
Right.
So,
So as far as the salt is concerned, the recent audit that we had about 6 years ago from the Division of Water Quality specifically stated that the bulk storage of that salt was a violation, leaving it uncovered. So I can't, this is the issue, remedy it, period. So that's the reasoning there as far as we're not meeting the requirement and we want to meet the requirement. As far as the other items, we spoke with cities in Utah County, cities in Davis County, talked to a private entity in Tooele, and as we spoke with these individuals, these were all places that had salt storage facilities. What's the good, the bad, and the ugly? And places were recommending, hey, we really liked flexible material or whatever rigid body, something flexible like the Bountiful bubble type material. In addition, we found that with a lot of flexible materials, we were finding higher warranty periods. And the warranty on the building here, frame is 50 years, and I think it's 20 years pro-rated on the membrane itself. And the membrane is split into sections to where if there is damage, you pull out one small piece and you replace that one small piece, and they're hooked together in sections. Also, it lended itself to being mobile. It was easy to disassemble and move to another location. That property, fire is looking for places to grow. Public Works and Power and the Parks and Rec departments have plans for the property in the future. So building a structure that, the ability to take down and move with other material isn't impossible, but it's far more difficult. So as we talked to these other cities, we got a lay of, okay, what do we want? And then another big contributing factor is, even though we have similar conditions to other cities, Kaysville is unique in the ordinance, as far as the building department is concerned, is withstand. And we had several people inquire about the project, and as they saw that requirement, sorry, we can't meet that, so.
all right, thanks. I mean, the tragedy would be if in, 8, 9, 10 years before we get enough life out of this building, that the building, needs to be moved and it's obsolete to us at that point, and I doubt there'd be a market for it, per se. I think a pole barn could be like 1/6 of the cost, a lean-to style deal. So to be spending that kind of money on a temporary apparatus is a little bit of a strain. Are we anticipating a new concrete floor?
That's period. We've already got an asphalt surface in place that will suffice for the floor. So as we met with the individual, the vendor, what additional costs are coming. They said it's the erection if you elect, and the cost for the membrane and frame itself, so no additional cost there.
I'm sure you would explore the issues of like trucks being able to get in and out of there and dump, and to be very efficient in the way that the salt is handled. It seems like it might be a little bit difficult to not have a concrete backstop for the loader to push into to be able to get.
We do have one incorporated. We have blocks that we already own that will be
Inside of the facility.
Mm-hmm.
I think that pretty well answers the questions. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right. Would you like to move that? Would you like to move that, B?
Back for, I motion to deny item B due to, obvious budget overruns and the expense overall of the particular product.
Any second? Motion dies for lack of a second. Can I have another motion, please?
Move to award the bid for the salt and miscellaneous storage structure.
By Councilmember Garn, seconded by Councilmember DeCare. Any comments? All right, let's go to Councilmember Page.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Okay, motion passes 4-1. Okay, C. Councilmember Adams.
Shepherd Lane, I guess top of the questions are, without taking into account curb and gutter, there's about $100,000 in there of storm drain work. Will that be coming from the storm drain budgets?
Correct.
Okay. What about street parking? We had a meeting with citizens here a couple weeks ago. We were told by the mayor there would be, we all agreed that there would be 3 sketches delivered of different design criteria, not necessarily engineering on the fly, but just design concepts for some of the citizenry input. Have those design concepts been delivered to the citizens?
So we met with engineers the week following that meeting. As we explored options, we found issues with, what about this option? What about this option? What about this option? We explored. There were a lot of things from, moving just to one side in the street, just today about maybe just having sidewalks on one side and active transportation on the other. As we've looked at various options, the big concerns to us that we heard were people are concerned about maintaining the on-street parking. People are concerned about that active transportation component. I think as that stood in the plan, Shepherd Lane was specifically called out, hey, this is a place where we're going to do bike striping. And then the other additional concern was speed. And as we discussed that, we felt like narrowing the travel lanes, speeds in the area. As we looked at it, we found one option that met the criteria, and no other options that were either technically sound or that we were comfortable with. So as we met with the residents, what I tried to express was we will try to give you as many options as possible. And that was before we identified the one option that was put forward of, hey, there might be options where you don't get parking and we're incorporating active transportation. So we put forth the one to the residents' concerns, and we would love for there to be multiple options, but with the time that we had, we found one option, it worked, and it had continuity with Farmington as far as the striping plan was concerned.
Continuity with Farmington, how does that matter, I guess, to us? You talked about for the east side of I-15?
Correct,
The
yeah.
stripes line up. The stripes.
So overall, can you just summarize again, what plan do you anticipate going forward with?
Yeah, so that's curb gutter on both sides of the road and repave the surface. We're adding some storm drain. And then as far as the striping plan, it will be a fog line, which is kind of a shoulder divider, an 11-foot travel lane, a double yellow median line and then a mirror image on the other side of the street. So as far as the active transportation component is concerned, what we settled on was utilizing what Farmington had done on Shepherd. It's called a Shero, which is meant to alert drivers there are bikes on this road, and it's a designated route for bikes. You need to be alert and courteous, and you also need to know that they're allowed to use the lane just like you. So we felt like that meets the intent of the active transportation plan for the city about parking and the speed concerns on Shepherd.
So that means that the street parking is still allowed then?
Correct, yeah.
Correct,
Yeah,
okay.
the recommended minimum for street parking, I think, is 8 feet, and there's 9.5 feet that we've got there, so some cushion
Okay, all right.
On both sides.
on both sides, correct.
All right. Okay.
Has anybody signed up to speak to this item?
This is a consent item, so we don't have a public hearing on consent items. All right? All right. Thank you. I'd entertain a motion at this time for C.
I'll move we award bid for Shepherd Lane curb sidewalk and paving project, formerly tabled item.
Okay.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember DeCare, seconded by Councilmember Garn. Comments? All right, Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Okay, motion is unanimous. Thank you. All right. Okay, we are now going to move to our action items. First is a resolution of the City Council of Kaysville City, Utah, authorizing and approving the execution and delivery of a master lease agreement, the Municipal Bonding Authority of Kaysville City, Utah, the authority, and a ground lease agreement authorizing the issuance and sale by the authority of its lease revenue bonds, Series 2019, in the aggregate principal amount of not more than $4.3 million, authorizing and approving the execution and delivery by the authority of General Indenture of Trust and First Supplemental Indenture of Trust, bond purchase agreement, certain security documents, and other documents required in connection therewith, authorizing the taking of the consummation of the transaction contemplated by the resolution and related matters.
Wow.
I did it. All right.
Mayor?
Yes.
Point of order. I apologize for this. It's probably me just not knowing how this works. I think I've done this one other time, but on the consent items, we had a motion on the table to approve the consent items, and then we moved the other two items, but I'm not sure we moved the
The remaining
two
ones.
remaining.
Two remaining.
This is why we work as a team. Thank you, Councilmember Garn. We're going to back up the truck.
Well played.
So we need to move, did we move A and D already?
I thought.
Maria, did we?
It looks to me like you voted on B and C to separate those out, but I don't remember an A and D.
A and D. Just to be doubly sure, let's go
I'll motion
ahead.
that we approve items A and D on the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Adams and seconded by Councilmember DeCare. Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
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 And motion is unanimous. Thank you, Councilmember Garn. All right, I'm not going to read that again, but that thing. Who is talking to this, speaking to this?
Me too. Thank you, Mayor. As you know, over the last several months, we've been working on the City Hall renovation project, and we have some preliminary numbers on what the cost of that project will be, and we have been working with the financial advisors on the best way to finance that project. So as we discussed in our work session a week or two ago, our recommendation is to do a lease revenue bond through a building authority. So the building authority would issue bonds for the construction of that building, and the city would in turn lease that building from the building authority. So what this action does, it to proceed in that direction, to continue to look at issuing bonds. As you recall, our financing proposal was estimated cost about $4.8 million. It's kind of the number we're working with, and that would include an equity investment of about $1 million from the city. So the financing, we think, will be about 3.8. And so the action on the City Council will be to authorize the building authority to proceed with the idea that it will be through a lease agreement with the building authority. And then later on this evening, you'll have authority action, which in turn will set a parameters resolution indicating that we will put this out to bid and sets the high end of the parameters on what we'll allow to, or what we'll accept as far as financing. So that'll be an action later on this evening.
Okay. And Shane, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay. All right. We'll now open the public hearing. Do we have anybody signed up to speak to this? Okay. Okay, questions from council. Councilmember DeCare.
So just to be clear here, budget retreat a couple of weeks ago on that, we're looking at about $3.8 million on lease revenue bonds, correct? We all have to go back to our rudimentary business math classes and look at about another $1.1 million worth of interest for a grand total of just over $5 million. So really, at the end of the day, that is our actual total cost of everything, correct?
Over the amortization.
That's what I meant, over the amortization period of over 15 years. Okay.
Minus the $1 million down payment.
Minus the $1 million down payment, correct. So,
Okay.
all right.
All
Just
right.
to be clear, just on the record, so.
Okay. Questions from council?
I think Councilmember Garn was approaching, though. I'll defer.
Okay, Councilmember Garden.
Oh,
Thank
thank you, Councilmember Adams. I think the question I would have is, I was just trying to understand the building authority. Does the city continue to lease the building from the building authority even after the maximum 17-year payback period, or is it only to facilitate the bond funding?
So after the amortization period, the building reverts to the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Adams.
Just by way of record, where this action, plug you. Sorry. It's up to $4.3 million, though. So the capacity of this bond that, is there's seeking to be, approved tonight is up to $4.3 million. Just so everybody's aware. There's a 3.7, 3.8, 3.9 being thrown around, but the bond allows them to go for 4.3 and use 4.3 if it gets to that point. And wasn't the interest a little bit more than 1.1? What was the interest?
Interest rate?
Yeah, no, not the rate, the total cost.
I don't recall.
It says on here
1.15? Is that what it is?
1,150,000.
Yeah.
Okay, one.
You're talking about total interest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
115-ish?
Yeah,
Yeah.
1.15.
Yeah, it should be in the packet.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
At 3.2% interest.
That's our
That's our
estimate.
estimate, yeah, right, best guess.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay.
No.
All right, let's go to, I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move that we pass resolution of City Council of Kaysville City, Utah, authorizing and approving the execution and delivery of master lease agreement between the city and the Municipal Building Authority of Kaysville. Yay.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember DeCare, seconded by Councilmember Garn. Any comments? Councilmember Adams.
I'm pretty confident my position on this issue is well-known, but in case it's not, I do not think that the scope of this project is necessarily needed. I think that the size and scope is overdone, and I think we're not taking advantage of other things that are at our fingertips. So just wanting to have that on the record.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Barber.
2 comments. So my first one, I had a question about the parameters as well. Basically, it's so we don't have to come back and do this again based on fluctuations. But I think it would be great to communicate, final costs will still come out, we'll still be able to see, but we don't have to come, city staff has the approval to go forward with the bond acquisition, because that's the first step, right? And communication doesn't have to be, you'll keep us updated as the progress goes forward.
In fact, our estimate calls for 3.8, 15-year period, and interest rate about 3.2. The parameters resolution says $4,300,000 as face value, up to 17 years, and or 6%. Now, if it's approaching 5 or 6%, we're not going to do it. But as the bids come in, we're going to evaluate which is the most cost-effective bid for the city. It may come in and a potential buyer say, I want to carry this over 16 years, or I want to carry it over 13 years. We'll evaluate that as the bids come in and see which is the most cost-effective method for the city.
I've learned a lot about bonding. And I think, will you come back and present which bond we go with, that we approve?
Isn't that June 6th?
Well, there'll be a hearing on June 6th, but the timing on this, an October start date.
Yeah.
So we will put this out to bid probably late August is when it will go out to bid. And, we don't want to get the money before we need it. And we'll keep you informed.
Yeah,
Yes,
obviously
Shane?
we'll keep you informed. Also, we won't bring this back because that is the whole point of the parameters resolution unless it exceeds any of those ceilings. But also keep in mind that you will have to accept the bids that come in too, so you'll certainly be aware of that.
So that still gives us the
power to say no at that time as well.
Okay, if it's a bad deal.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say is, in being part of this process, it was interesting to hear about how right now is actually a pretty opportune time to go for a bond of this size, and just kind of the sweet spot that we're hitting with the down payment versus the lease rate of the lower. I actually wanted the longer term. I thought that would spread out the cost longer, but if we get that lower interest rate, it actually makes quite a bit of sense. So
that 15-year term
the
brought our
15-year
rate
term
down.
Yeah.
And we're also under the increased percentage of construction costs every year. So that's another thing that we're trying to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Garn?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I may be slightly repeating a couple of things that have put them in more clear terms, or to speculate a little bit at the risk, but I think most economic projections, you can never really project the economy, but the Fed has sent a lot of signs that they're not increasing interest rates soon. You've got an inverted yield curve, which means has predicted each of the last 5 recessions, I think. So that would tend to keep interest rates low. So I think the risk between now and June, but as you mentioned, Dean, if it were to jump up to the max 6%, we're probably not doing it at that point, so you've got a 3.2% rate. To Councilmember Barber's point, and to do it when you look at timing, because time value of money at 3.2%, construction costs, even the CPI is approaching those levels, although lower. There's different measures of inflation, but construction inflation, particularly in Utah with the hot economy, has arguably been higher than 3.2. So, delay in this case, interestingly enough, even after the $60,000 for bond issuance costs and all of the interest costs over time, is actually less expensive than delay if you look at it from a time value of money. And that's when bonding makes sense, as long as you keep bond the saturation point that the city can support, then it makes sense.
Thank you. Any comments?
I was just going to say, I think the timing is actually perfect for this. Typically going into the winter seasons, you're going to get a little better deal when it comes to the bidding process going into the fall like we're doing. I just think this is long overdue in the city.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go to a vote. Councilmember DeCare.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Okay, next we're going to adoption of the tentative budgets for fiscal year 2019.
A couple weeks ago, we took a review of the tentative budget. As you know, this becomes the starting place for the budget process for each year. The council had an opportunity to review that. We've presented a tentative budget that's balanced, revenues equal expenses, particularly in the general fund. So the action tonight is to adopt the tentative budgets, and that becomes the starting place where the budget is now available to the public to inspect. After your action tonight, we will post it on the city website. We'll have copies available in the office. And then over the next several months, we'll continue to work on the council's needs and desires and adopt the budget for fiscal year 2020.
Thank you. Do we have anybody signed up to speak to this? No. Thank you. I did want to mention, I heard a great idea another city had done. They made a taxpayer receipt for their taxes and calculated out percentage-wise how much of your property taxes went to each line item. If we can figure out how to do that, I think that would be a great way to show people exactly where their money's going. And I know my house, we ended up spending about $250, paying $250 in property tax to the city.
The whole year.
The whole year,
Yeah.
yeah. That's my cell phone bill.
Yeah, I know.
Every
A month.
A month, right. But I think it would be, I would like to have more citizen engagement in a constructive way. So it's going to be put online, and I would welcome people to go have a look at that. And if you think of, if you have questions, we'll send you to Dean, because he will do a little seminar. Questions from council on this?
Oh, not a question, comment, but I'll wait.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to have a work session, so that's when we have comments.
Mm-hmm.
So this is questions just about adopting the
Yes,
tentative
correct.
budget. I don't think I have any.
Okay. Any questions about adopting the preliminary budget? Okay. I would welcome a motion at this time.
Well, I'll move that we adopt the tentative budgets for fiscal year 2019.
Second the motion.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Page, seconded by Councilmember Adams. Any comments? Councilmember
Just a
Kerr.
quick one. Since I lead a really exciting life, and I poured over, we all received a couple of weeks ago over the past couple of weeks during the evenings and that, and I feel as though that things look in exceptional good order from top to bottom, from everything that I've saw and seen. I think that our financial director, Dean Story, along with all the rest of our city staff, does an amazing job with keeping things as transparent as they can within operating within our budget constraints. We run really lean here in Kaysville as a city, and I feel as though there's not a lot of excess, there's not a lot of frivolity or anything like that in our budget. Work-driven, if you will, and I feel exceptionally confident that moving in the right direction with this is the right way to go. So thank you to city staff. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Garn.
And I would agree with Councilmember DeCare. Don't want to repeat any of that, but I would just say that what maybe the public sees is in a council meeting and even in our work sessions is the tip of the iceberg, that city staff pores over every line and has to make tough decisions sometimes, and there's never every essential need. And we're talking about the most basic essential needs that you'll find anywhere in government. If you look around, most of the services that are provided that we use every day are provided by our city, not even by the state, not by the county, although there's a lot of cooperation. I don't want to minimize that at all, but and federal government, but the things we use every day come from the city at a better price than any other level of government, I would say, the value that you get from the city. And part of that is because the staff is poring over every line item and making tough choices, trying to become more efficient. And I appreciate this even getting the budget.
Thanks. Shane, I think it would be interesting for people to understand what goes into building the budget. Could you talk about when do you start working on the budget?
We usually start talking about it in February. We get the department heads involved probably early March, give them a couple weeks to put together their requests, any changes. Those are brought back. We usually meet with them individually and collectively if we need to, as we talk about their needs, and obviously their needs or their wants are always more than the revenue we have. So we've had to work together in this as a collective body, and right now we're in really good shape with the department heads we have and the ability they have to work together with each other. It's a really unique and exciting situation. Of course, Dean and even Cammie, to a large extent, put together the little things I think that Councilmember Garn mentioned, or Councilmember Stroh, the line-by-line details. We look at every line, evaluate it from what last year to this year, what's changed, what do we need to increase, what do we need to decrease, and revenue projections. Dean goes over those very, very clearly. I've coined a new term in Kaysville called Deanizing. Dean Deanizes the budget. He is very conservative with revenues. Keyword always or never. Those are words that I don't like to use, but we always bring in more revenue than we plan to, and we always spend less than we plan to. So that's to Dean's credit. So we go through all those things. We then sit down with the department heads again once Dean and I have kind of tried to make a decision about what our priorities are and what we'd like to present to the council. And then, of course, we talk about some of the things that we haven't been able to fund that we'd like to. And we, I know that some of you have heard from residents and department heads and those kinds of things about some of the things that aren't in the budget. And I know some of those are concerns to you, and we want to vet a lot of that out. So
the tentative budget, which you'll be able to find online by tomorrow, will be a balanced budget. So that means that we will be able to meet those expenses. When it comes to pumping the brakes, we've already thrown out everything that we can't afford. And some of those things were things that we really actually need, like 3 more police officers, 3 more firefighters, so staff, other things that have been requested that we just can't afford. Budget that you will find online balances. Now, if somebody wants to put something else in the budget, we're going to have to shift money around and do without something that we need in order to pay for that. Now, if you can find something in that budget that we don't need, please bring it to my attention. I always loved many sets of eyes. Bring it to my attention what we don't need. I'd be glad to look at that. So, all right, that's what I would say about that. Any other comments? All right, let's go for a vote.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's a good learning experience. Okay, Councilmember Adams.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes
Joe, you
unanimously.
got to speak up on these votes, man. I can't hear you.
No one
All right.
knows where you're voting.
Amendment of Chapter 17-26, Home Occupations of Title 17, Planning and Zoning of Revised Ordinances of Kaysville City. Lyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Council, so the item before you is something that we've been working on with the Planning Commission over multiple
No side
meetings.
conversations. Point of order.
You're not chairing the meeting. I got it. Thanks.
Point of order then. Call it out.
Thank you.
All right.
You're right.
Got it.
Lyle?
I'm looking at this from our Planning Commission members. This item came up as a consideration where we deal with just about every Planning Commission meeting a handful of home businesses. We have a variety of types of those within Kaysville, our minor home occupations that in theory you don't know that they're even there operating a business. Most frequently what the Planning Commission sees are what's categorized currently as a home occupation B, and typically that's where they have a customer coming to their home. And with the request of the Planning Commission and some research, we looked over multiple types of businesses that we've seen regularly come before that body to receive a conditional use approval. but we're not seeing any conditions being placed on those, a handful of them. And so the idea was to better serve the time of the Planning Commission on whether or not they should be revisiting those and use their time elsewhere, but also those applicants that are requesting those licenses to take a few. The ordinance creates a new category called the Home Occupation C, and essentially those businesses, single chair, hair salon, esthetician, or barber shop, small group lessons for tutoring under 4 students, daycare for under 2 children, dressmaking are some that we've seen on a regular basis that, like, time and again, the Planning Commission simply approves without additional conditions. So it continues to keep to maintain the home business feel and not bring them up to a commercial business level. But what this would allow is for a business to make application, for example, for a hair salon, single chair hair salon, without having to come to a public meeting to receive their final approval. So they're still subject to the same parameters, the same standards. But of note, an item that the Planning Commission mentioned they were interested in, and one of the reasons they like the process of coming before them was so the neighbors are aware of what's happening there. So under a conditional use, it's not necessarily a popularity contest on whether or not they get to do it. It's something that generally has to be approved per statute, and just a matter of whether or not there are conditions that come with it. And so what this calls out is staff, as we're processing the business license and looking at it, for those that fit in this category, we would send a mailer to properties within 100 feet to let them know, hey, there's a business coming, so that if they see people being dropped off or a car coming, they know it's not just a strange party or strange people coming on a regular basis. So the Planning Commission's made recommendation on the ordinance as proposed, passed it along unanimously to the council. Should the council agree and decide to approve of the ordinance, you'll see trailing very shortly after changes to our zoning districts to actually allow for these home occupation Cs within those districts on where they happen. With that, I'll close my remarks and be happy to take any questions.
Okay. Do we have anybody signed up to speak to this item? No. Okay, we won't have a public hearing. Questions from council? No? Any questions?
One question.
Councilmember Barber.
So the signage will all still be the same. That won't change. It'll still get posted.
So
Sign will go up.
Currently, the way it is written, it would not. So currently, what we do on a home occupation B is put up the yellow public notice sign to let people know that it's going to be on a meeting agenda. What this currently is written, it says we'll actually send a mailer out to those closest to them rather than the sign.
Mailer will stay. The sign will not.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Currently, we don't do mailers on conditional uses. We do on other application types, but that's what this proposes, is a mailer in lieu of a sign to give people notice of what's coming.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Is there a big energy savings
Adams.
for staff by not putting the sign up? I think that might. Is 26 on that point?
Yeah, it's not very time consuming for us to put up the sign. It certainly could be an option if it's felt by the council that that's preferable over the mailed notice. We'd be happy to do that. I think that a lot more people that could see a sign. You may have people that don't necessarily drive the same street. They're backdoor neighbors that would get mail but may not drive by the sign. So both could be done. It's not a time-consuming effort for us to put up a sign.
I'd be a fan of both. How many houses do we think we'll send the letter to? What would that radius look like?
The 100 feet typically picks up about 2 houses on every side of the business that's taken place. So, a sign would pick up more than that, but you're probably talking maybe 10 homes on average that would receive a mailed notice.
And then a rural area that could extend past the 100-foot to at least clip the immediate surrounding homes.
Where necessary, so we have lots as small as 60 feet in width where you're picking up multiple. In the rural areas, you got wider lots where you may only hit the next door neighbors and backdoor neighbors at the 100-foot distance, so a different distance could be considered to get a larger group.
Cool.
All right. Councilmember Barber.
It makes you wonder, though, if it's all just according to our ordinances, whether it falls in line or it doesn't. What role does public input play, though? I mean, if
On a conditional use, a little. So clamor is essentially irrelevant on a conditional use permit.
Yeah.
Per state statute for a conditional use permit, we have uses that are permitted by right. So if somebody applies for a home, they get to do that. They certainly have parameters they still have to meet. They're not going through any public vetting or process. Conditional use, the state has said very similarly, if it's listed as a conditional use, it's permitted. That's not something that you're here to deny.
Yeah.
But, they do have a little bit more impact potentially than some of your other uses, so it gives the city a chance to say, maybe within these restraints or confines, home business, we've seen things, and you can't have more than one customer at a time. And so those are just written into specific standards rather than looking at them case by case. We've just seen over time on these particular items, roughly 30 type of hair salons.
I saw that, yeah.
And I'm probably getting that number wrong, but that was one of the biggest ones over the past few years. But I didn't find a single one where we've placed conditions on them. So the specific restraints within the ordinance appeared to be sufficient enough on those, and those are similar for these other suggested types.
That's why I feel like there's no chance for them public to come speak. So it's kind of a formality. I mean, I guess it's good to alert your neighbors that this is happening, but it's basically just let them know it's happening. It's not to say, come voice your opinion, anything else.
And the public can get frustrated with that on occasion where they see a notice, they come to a meeting, they've got concerns, but we may not have the means as a city to say no to that, or it can be difficult to find a nexus for specific constraints. So I think the Planning Commission recognized that you don't want to put an applicant through a overburdensome process, set an unrealistic expectation for neighbors, but that it was important for them to know because people want to know what's happening in the area. And so that notice would, again, not say, come tell us what you think and whether or not you like it, but this is happening, beware. And so, again, the council ultimately has the option on, is the noticing sufficient? That could be a modification put in ordinance that we would follow as staff, with essentially staff managing rather than going before your planning commission for additional oversight.
Okay. Councilmember Kern.
Where this, thought I had a comment, but I might preface it a little bit. Councilmember, but this is a question. Councilmember DeCare and I think you served maybe 6 years or something like that, and I was there maybe 5 years, and so we can kind of speak to all the conditional uses, and in every case, home business approved and not really concerns. My question relates to the few times administrative procedure, and there is enforcement a little bit too, and that's the nature of my question. So sometimes we'd have something come back to the Planning Commission though, and perhaps someone was not complying with sort of the conditions, maybe they're parking on the street, or they weren't supposed to have employees come there, and they are, and the neighbor complains, and then it's still administrative, right? That's still something that the city would field that, not necessarily the Planning Commission. So I'm not arguing at all that the Planning Commission should still be involved. I don't think they should. And by the way, they were unanimous in saying that we don't really think we need to be involved in this. But I guess, and now instead of conditional use permit, it's a prescribed that it's okay to have this particular type of business. Would you still have other ordinances around that, whether they be nuisance or specific or something that would say, but you can't do this to your neighbor, and if you do and it's reported or we notice, then we can do some sort of enforcement action?
Yeah, so certainly we still have the means to continue enforcing and ensuring that they fall within the parameters of the ordinance. I'd be happy to grab it. I have all the text here in front of me. So there are some very specific types of signage, types of vehicles, number of customers at a time, how much of your home could be used towards these types of businesses. So all of those as staff, we've got the ability to enforce and continue. If we're faced with a situation where we're not able to achieve compliance, where there's a dispute between a business and staff, the Planning Commission still functions as an oversight body to us, as an appeals authority for decisions that we make. So the power still can lie within there if it elevates to that level where they can continue to oversee it. And I think something that I've witnessed on a regular basis with our planning commission that gives a little bit of concern is the planning commission is fallen, and I hear it on occasion that if it's not working out, they'll come back and we'll change those conditions. And that flexibility is not necessarily there currently with the planning commission. And once those parameters are set and somebody's acting within those, then they would be allowed to continue that. And I'll look to my right if I'm misspeaking there, but whenever there is a step out of bounds from the parameters, whether it's specific conditions or what's set forth as the specific standards of the ordinance, then staff does have the ability to enforce and ensure a compliance with those. Where there's not compliance, revocation, dealing with the planning commission as an oversight or appeals authority is the next.
Wouldn't we, it also seems that if we get too prescribed, like if the council said, we just don't like Kool-Aid stands or something like that, and we, no permit required for that, so probably a bad example, but if we get too prescribed in what we will allow in our city and what we won't in terms of land use that's allowed under state law or business rights and I think the legislature is pretty aggressive in defending, sort of the business rights, we could actually run afoul of state law too. In fact, the legislature, I think, responds to some of those aberrations that happen in cities. Is that your
direction, if I'm understanding the question correctly, so bear with me, that we've received from our council, so our commission. I think there are multiple points of interest as to why this is being considered, and one individual in particular, Commissioner Summercorn, has been highly specific and encouraging that we kind of move in this direction. If we can just set these specifics and standards and be more clear on who's going through what, even through a conditional use process, our conditions that we do place should be based on very specific criteria and standards. And some of the nebulous nature the cities have had historically and flexibility on whether or not they approve a conditional use and what types of conditions are pulling away, and there's less and less ability to do that. So the response and answer to that is put in black and white within your ordinances what you do and don't want, and just put them as permitted uses. Get them out of the potential clamor realm with public meetings and items where, again, those expectations of both the planning commission and the residents may not be met, but rather just have the clear standards and just keep them permitted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Back on the sign, I would just say that I think
Adams.
people are conditioned to those signs in town. And so they get a letter in the mail. Oftentimes it looks like junk mail. It's get monthly billing utility statement. So I just think that the sign, I'm not advocating at all for all these issues to come back to Planning Commission, for them to be the governing body over the issues. I'm definitely an advocate for you to be the governing body over the issues and you to decide whether it fits this, that, or the other. But I think on the people's side, if they're aware, they can at least come and speak to you.
Correct.
No, they're not going to come and they definitely have the right to come and speak to their Planning Commission and their council. But I think it's just one more spot where perhaps something that maybe an applicant is coming in with, that a neighbor maybe knows this, that, or the other, or maybe there's a history of this, that, or the other. I think the sign really helps invoke people saying, wait, because of this reason, I'd like to come and voice this. So I just think the sign is what people are conditioned to in town, and where you're saying it's not really a headache, I'd love to see the sign and the letter, and those are the reasons why.
Yeah, we could absolutely do that, and I would just encourage if the council's on board with that. I don't think from staff that's a problem to do it. If you would, within a motion, if that's the direction, maybe give some guidance on how long the sign should be up for. Typically, we're doing them predating meetings, and so that gives us kind of a time frame of when it goes up and when it comes down. I don't know if you want to see it up for 5 days or what a good number is. I'm not certain. That's pretty similar to about a week that we function now prior to a planning commission meeting. Hey, if I apply, I'm going to have a sign in my yard for 3 days, a week, whatever it is. And I believe that we could definitely accomplish that as staff. That shouldn't be a problem.
And just one point of clarification, if I may, though. At the point that the sign goes up, the applicant's already vested. So they're already permitted to use that property for whatever business they want. Right. So I don't disagree that the sign has some very positive benefits, but if the council's under the impression that the sign goes up, and then citizens could come and express concerns. At that point, that ship has sailed because the application vests the applicant with the...
And shifting the process then, it's sign for X days, then it moves forward. Because I get your point, that definitely negates the sign, and that's going to create people just getting furious.
Councilmember Barber.
I feel like the whole purpose of the planning commission recommended this, though, was to get away from that, was to just say this is just a formality, that we're basically approving these people. If they fall in line with our ordinances, they can have a home occupation.
We are removing them. We're removing that body. I'm not advocating to let that body keep dealing with these issues.
But they're advocating that we change the way we process completely to what Nick was saying upon application. And so I don't want to give residents a false sense of they have a say in this, because they really don't. It's administrative.
I think they should have a say. I disagree. I don't concur on that point, because they could contact Lyle, though. Essentially, you're removing the appointed body and the elected body from the issues, but you've still got to give somebody a right to come and say, hey.
Councilmember DeCare.
Much to your point, though, to the contrary of your point, Councilman Adams, so that's absolutely not correct, though, because if the conditional use is permitted within that zone, then it just happens. Public clamor, I mean, with my years of land, public clamor is exceptionally limited. If it falls within the parameters of the zone, I mean, if the use falls within in that zone, then it's permitted, and it's pretty much just a formality at that point. So, I mean, that may not sound conducive to the public process and that, but that's the way that Utah State Code and Ordinance is drafted, and that's the way that it's presented when it comes to land use issues, though. So
I would say you're semi-correct.
You have not been called on.
Historically, we haven't done it that way.
Councilmember Adams.
Can I add one thing here, please?
Yes, go ahead.
So let me just read out of the Utah Citizens handed 6 years ago. It states, such ordinances are regulatory overkill. Remember that when a conditional use is allowed in the ordinance, absenting language to the contrary, the use is to be granted unless there is substantial evidence in the record upon which the denial is based. Without such evidence, home occupations should usually be allowed. And that's quoted right out of Utah Code 10-9A 801C3. So that's what defines that parameter.
Councilmember Page, then Councilmember.
It sounds like we're having a discussion, don't we? Isn't that after the...
Oh, I know. We kind of got a far field there. But.
All right, let's move this and then continue the discussion afterwards. Yes?
If I may, Mayor, I failed to talk about sort of a second point that this ordinance does, and I apologize about that. So the primary focus was this home occupation C category. There are also some changes to our youth business category, just based on regular practices that we're dealing with. So right now, it essentially accommodates the lemonade stand, but not necessarily if somebody babysits or mows lawn. I mean, it essentially requires you to be at your house, and places limitation on 16 and under and evaluation of how much they're doing. So we felt it was appropriate in discussion as well to put that a little bit more in line with very common youth business.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's take a motion, and then we'll have comments.
I'll move that we approve amendment of Chapter 1726, Home Occupations of Title 17, Planning and Zoning of the Revised Ordinances of Kaysville City.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilmember DeCare, seconded by Councilmember Page. Comments at this time? All right, Councilmember Garn.
Quick comment. I don't think we could really change the process even if we left the ordinance as it is, because that's controlled by state law. And if we were to pass something that said we're now going to assess out of, granting home occupations, I think we'd run afoul. I'm not an attorney, but I think we'd run afoul of state law. So I don't know that even if we thought that was a good idea, we could do it. To me, this is an administrative process. Got unanimous approval of the planning or recommendation of the Planning Commission. I think it's a good change, and I support it.
Okay, comments? Councilmember Page.
No, I was just saying, I think this is an excellent change, and what it does, it gets us in line with the rights that the people have. I mean, it comes down to property rights and to be able to use your property ordinance. I think the concern comes that when people can clamor and take that right away from a person, I think we need to be careful on that. And then just an administrative, I notice on this ordinance we have Councilmember Hanson over here.
Oh,
We
I
need
know,
to be
yeah.
changing that.
Yeah, that needs to change, yeah.
As
So,
part of it. In fact,
yeah.
all these have that.
I actually
on
made that,
So-
I told our city
flagged that.
recorder, Maria, about that.
Anyway.
yeah, so.
Okay.
So,
All right. Any more comments?
No, I've already said
Okay,
it.
let's go to a vote. Councilmember Page.
aye.
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 Nay.
Okay, amendment of Chapter 9-4, Water, and Chapter 9-6, Pressure Irrigation of Title 9, Public Works, and Chapter 18-3, Pressure Irrigation Water of Title 18, Building Regulations, and Chapter 19-9, Subdivision Improvements Required of Title 19 Subdivision of the Revised Ordinances of Kaysville City. Take it away.
Okay, I'll hopefully address the overall content of this pretty specifically. We had at our planning commission a member from Weber Basin Water District. They spoke a little bit more to the technical reasons behind a lot of this. But we were approached by culinary water here in Kaysville City and multiple jurisdictions here in our region. And they're working with multiple cities, Farmington, Fruit Heights, Layton City, on removing a requirement to utilize secondary water systems and pressurized water systems east of Highway 89. My layman's understanding on that creates additional connections, but also pressure fluctuations and issues with their system that are less desirable, and also with some water conservation points. They're hoping properties in those areas would utilize culinary system potentially to utilize less water overall. They came and spoke with us in more specifics. You could watch some of the comments that they did at that meeting that they were able to attend. What the ordinance requests, again, based from them, is it just makes some changes. Right now, every residential development within Kaysville City is required to connect to a secondary system for their irrigation water, without exception, under new development. This gives it as an option east of 89 that's no longer a requirement. If that were to make sense, we don't have very much property there. There's a few still to be developed, then they would have that ability. And so multiple sections of the ordinance talk about that. If they're not utilizing that, then it speaks to its reverse pressure, backflow preventer systems that would be required and cleanliness of that. The second component, well, and speaking to that, we've been in contact with all of our irrigation providers. We have multiple here within Kaysville City. Mostly Davis Weber and potentially Haight Creek irrigation would be the ones impacted. So they are aware of it and haven't received any concerns or comments based on the proposal where it directly affects their systems. The second part to it is a change with our subdivision improvements that are required. So what it does is state that with new development and subdivisions, a conduit, I'm looking for the word, that would be put in place that ultimately could facilitate communication systems. It references standard drawings that are still to be completed, but this puts it in. So typically developers building your sewer, your water, laterals and pipe and roads, curb gutter, sidewalk. Now this would be another item that's in there available for those providers to be worked out with those specific details. The Planning Commission, after reviewing it, recommended unanimously approval of the ordinance as proposed. And I'll do my best to take any questions regarding it and go from there.
Thank you. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment? Thank you. All right, so we'll go to questions from council. Any questions on this? Seeing none, I'll
move that we approve amendment of Chapter 9-4 Water and Chapter 9-6 Pressure Irrigation of Title 9 Public Works and Chapter 18-3 Pressure Irrigation Water of Title 18 and so forth.
Second motion.
It's been moved by Councilmember Takar, seconded by Councilmember Adams. Any comments at this time?
One quick comment.
Councilmember Takar.
I think that, and actually this is something that Councilmember Page and I discussed last week. I think that putting in conduit, explicitly for communications is nothing short of a fantastic idea. So do a decade ago, 15 years ago when West Kaysville was in full proliferation, I think that it would have made things a lot easier down the line. So I'm really happy to see these changes to these ordinances, and it's pretty forward thinking at this point. So I think it's an excellent idea. So.
Great. Any other comments?
No.
Okay. Let's go to a vote. Councilmember Gurn.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we'll now go to our work items, budget discussion. Shane.
Thanks, Mayor. I would like to echo what many of you have said about mostly Dean and Cammie and preparing the budget for FY20. Appreciate them very much and all they've done and have done for many years. Thank you for your attendance at the budget retreat a couple of Fridays ago. I think it was an excellent meeting. I was really excited about it, and I hope you had a good experience there as well. I hope since then you've had a chance to look at your manuals, look at them, think about it. I've heard from several of you about some items, and we'll probably talk about those more today or in future meetings. But tonight, this is the first of, I think, maybe 3 or 4 of these kinds of budget work sessions. I think this is a good time to invite department heads about it. We didn't invite any tonight. Dean, of course, is here for general budget questions, but if you have certain items you'd like to talk about more and we'd like to vet out, we'll make sure we get the proper person here to talk about those things. So we're here for questions, for discussion, and appreciate your efforts on the budget.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any specific items to speak to tonight on budget?
Sorry.
Okay.
I have one thought.
Councilmember Barber.
There's 2 things that kind of stood out to me that I would like to review, not necessarily tonight, but it kind of in order of when they come to present. The first one is flushed out sooner rather than later, just so we know what they're going to be, because they'll impact what we budget for. So if we could, I don't know who, I'm assuming it's Dean that would come present and we'd finalize those. And that'd be great. Maybe like the first discussion, first week.
So maybe the 16th?
Yeah. Yes, we discussed that.
Okay.
And then the other one is, that I keep thinking a lot about is staffing. I think that would be a good discussion to have. I know.
Did you say staffing?
Staffing, yeah. I know my recommendation was not to add any staffing, but I think it would be, there's a few that I've been thinking, police specifically, and then our finance department as well. Just making sure for next year, getting them. That's just me personally.
Okay. Any other specifics?
If this, just since you went there, or you kind of jogged my memory, if this is becoming public now, we did get an email where you're advocating for pickleball lights, so I think that needs to be, and it's already, from what I gathered in the email, it looks like it's going to be in the tentative. So we better make sure that that's adjusted in this before it goes public, if that's what you guys are doing.
It's not in the tentative, but it would be our recommendation to include it. And I think, as I mentioned, I can't remember how much detail I gave you in the email, but I think I said we'll make that an extremely easy thing to fund, or something that we'd have to wait and see to fund, or we would not be able to fund. And if you remember, Councilmember Adams, a lot of the discussion of the impact fees was surrounding the park impact fee, which is what would apply to these lights. So I think that depends on the lights. And again, it's up to you. If you don't want to fund the lights, that's fine too. Yeah. But I think we'd be able to do that depending on how much of the impact fee you do decide to include.
Okay.
Can I make
yes, Councilmember Barber.
Just to that point, my advocacy was after that meeting, it was really clear to me that lights or any other parks improvement couldn't come from a general fund stance. We just don't have it. It couldn't come from park impact fees that could only be used for that. So to me, it's not a matter of yes or no, it's just a timing. If it's not this year, I'm okay with that. It could be next year, but just when they're available. And to me, I think the only other more pressing, and we'll have Cole come present. We have Pioneer Park that we're committed to. And so let's make sure we get all of that. And then depending on what we decide for impact fees, let's see how much money we have available. So that's my perspective on those.
All right. Other comments?
I got some questions.
Councilmember Adams.
Unless somebody else was raising their hand.
No.
Go ahead. I defer.
So when we left the budget retreat, I left with the understanding that none of the employees were being granted, none of the requested employees, that no pay raises were being granted and things of that nature. So I have a question on the capital outlay equipment in the Public Works Department. You're tentatively approving $444,000. Historically, for a little background for people, in 2017, this line item had 13 grand. 2018, it had 40 grand, and in 2019, it had 13 grand. And staff is tentatively pushing forward with a $450,000 line item here. What is that for? Public Works.
Just general fund?
Just general fund, yep. So while you're looking that up, so people know, this is the section of Public Works that draws from the general fund monies. And the general fund monies are where all things are unrestricted. That's kind of where the council really can weigh in and say this, that, or the other. A storm drain type money, like Dean was inferring, has a lot more legal parameters placed upon those monies, so what you can and can't do with it. Storm drain money is where, general fund money is where there's a lot of input and give and pull that can be put.
I'm sorry, if you'll just give me just a few minutes to call this up.
Sure.
Perhaps it would be helpful, Councilmember Adams, if you would say tab number.
We don't have page numbers, so I can't do that, but it's in the Public Works tab. And just, if you go to Capital Equipment and Projects.
I'm wondering too, Dean, if that's funding that we may spend if we get that grant from the Volkswagen. I don't know if that's related to that or not.
Okay, we're looking at.
I don't think so. That's the e-vehicle charging stations.
Well, it's that we did one with electric that we didn't receive, and then Josh also put in for some truck upgrades too. So, and we haven't heard if we got that yet. So,
is this the 3 dump trucks that was discussed that the federal government?
The amount of $444,000 is for the 3 dump trucks that. We're proposing that's the general fund share of that, and we're hoping that we'll be part of that diesel settlement, and we'll receive some money there. We're thinking about $225,000. So our intent is to leverage what money we can receive through a grant program, and purchase those vehicles.
So we're budgeting for $444,000. We're hoping we get half of that from the federal government, and if we don't, currently as this tentative budget sits, if it were to pass, that would be $444,000.
Well, there's also an entry on the revenue side of that $225,000. I suspect that if we don't receive that funding, there's no way we can move forward on that purchase of those 3 dump trucks.
Actually,
I mean, we're basing this with the assumption that we're going to receive that revenue. If we don't receive that revenue, I think we'll revisit that for sure.
Well, I mean, if it were me, I would cut that in half right now and say, like, we're going to budget this much, and if we don't get it, we're not doing the trucks at all. I mean, we've got police who are looking for resource officers at schools with a similar program where the district is offering to pay half. A lot of equipment expenditures that I'm seeing in Public Works.
That's exactly what I think our intent would be, to not do that project at all if we didn't get the funding. So what's confusing, I think, is that you see where we're spending $440,000, but if you look at the revenue, we're receiving $225,000. So if we don't get that funding, both of those are going to go away, and we would have $200,000 something dollars to put to something else. And I think there would be better places to put it than trucks of any sort. So, and then we let you know. I think we should be able to be hearing that in the next couple of weeks. So I'm hoping we can flesh that out before the budget's adopted.
So maybe we could have Public Works come in last.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I know we just recently, and we bought a bobtail, or no, we bought like an F550 for $100,000, and there's a recent brand new 10-wheeler plow truck that was purchased in the last several years. So I'm just trying to weigh out, how much money do we keep pouring into equipment when I think that our trucks are doing just fine? If you were to go look at the odometers on them, they probably have a tenth of the miles, I would guess, of what private contractors have on theirs in their life expectancy of their dump trucks. So I just get a little bit leery when I see how much money is spent. On a governmental level, it's great to have new, but in the face of so many other things that we need right now, and in the face of spending $1 million on a doubling the size of this bill bit.
If I could just interject, good point. It might be a good idea to have a policy about how long we keep trucks, what is best practice. So that might be something that we should have in place. I believe I heard 7 years is about as long as you want to keep truck because of the wear and tear. So anyway.
It probably depends on the truck. The trucks we're trying to replace, some of them are from the 80s and 90s, so these are very old vehicles. They're part of the Volkswagen settlement because they are terrible with the environment. They're just very good vehicles at all, so that's why we're trying to replace those.
Air quality.
And we do have a fleet process that we go through where we evaluate with Mike, our mechanic, not Mike and the mechanics. Mike, the mechanic, who sits down with us at least annually, sits down with Dean much more, and goes through our fleet and says, these are the trucks that need to go, these are the ones that are top priority, and we go through that with him and evaluate those accordingly.
Okay, that's great.
Awesome.
All right. Councilmember Gurn.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one point about that. It's interesting. I saw a truck the other day that had hardly any body left. It was just like the undercarriage. Everything else was rough.
It wasn't a Kaysville City truck, was it?
It wasn't, but I could mention that. In 2015, there was a couple snowplows out there that were pretty close to that, and how old they looked. Can they still run down the road? Absolutely. And if you keep pouring maintenance into them and you get the parts, maybe even have them manufactured in a machine shop or whatever, you can keep that vehicle running down the road. But I think what is the ideal place to repair? It's maybe difficult to calculate, but it's not completely unknown either, because it's not just whether the truck will run or not, and what condition it's in, or how much downtime does it have. Because again, if you look at equipment or buildings like this building, or you look at equipment and you look at that over time compared to the general fund budget or the other impact fees, by far, like maybe 80% of your expense comes from, I'm throwing a number out here without verifying it, so Dean can give me the nod if I'm too high, but it's pretty high on salaries. So again, if you're to do time motion studies, that has a real cost. If you have people that have downtime with their equipment and they don't have sharp tools, guess what? You're paying them to sit. And that is far more expensive than the price of the equipment be functional enough to be out when it's needed, so that we're not wasting employees' time with down trucks and half the equipment that we need.
Just to see how much time the new ones spend at the dealer.
I think that goes to, I have the floor, Councilman Adams. I think that goes to speak to one thing. I mean, you can sum that up in one word, I think. It's efficiency. And, we want to run as efficient as we possibly can. And, and if that means that we have to spend the capital to have good resources, to be efficient, to not have downtime, to have plowed streets, to have a public works department that operates efficiently, I think that's I'm as careful, I'm as fiscally conservative as anybody else is here. And, but sometimes spending the capital, it does outweigh, problems and issues down the road with trying to maintain and repair old dated equipment. So.
Okay, yeah.
Just a comment. We actually went through this with the city not too long ago. We had some of the police cars that were older, had a lot of miles, and they had a lot of problems. And there was actually nights that we only had one car on patrol because the other ones were in the shop.
Right.
Well, you can't do that very often, and that's just not good business for the city. I mean, there's philosophy out there. If an individual has a business and he wants to limp along with his equipment, that's his choice, and he can decide what he wants to do. But I don't think we have that option with the city. We need to make sure that we have good equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully it's more than 7 years.
Councilmember Adams.
Useful life out of a couple $100,000 asset. I certainly would hope for that.
Whatever best practice is what I would recommend we adopt. So.
Well, I mean, we're sitting here talking about, we're preaching, you gave an eloquent speech about fiscal conservancy, but we just voted for a $300,000 building that's not budgeted for. Like, where do you get that money from? So I think that's why it is important to split hairs sometimes and to dive in. I mean, we hear a lot from you about how much homework you do, but I've never seen you take a contrarian view to anything. So in the water utility fund, Dean, what is the capital outlay equipment of $140,000 for? In 2017, it was $3,200. 2018, it was $10,000. 2019, it was $126,000, and now it's $140,000. So what's the equipment we're buying on that department now?
The description we have on there is funds for the purchase of a replacement crew vehicle and shared purchase detection equipment, sharing some costs on the 3 new dump trucks and the backhoe lease.
Okay, so the dump trucks are more than 440 grand.
Yeah.
So we're finding, so what is the total on the dump trucks? Do we know?
Well,
So
it's 444 in the general fund. Looks like we've got 60 here in the water, and I think we've got an equivalent amount in the storm drain, as I recall. Let me look real quick. I don't see anything in the storm drain. It appears, as I recall, just the general fund plus 60,000 in water.
Okay, thanks, Dean. In the same category, we got $400,000 category in the last 3 years, basically had $0. So what is this big project? Do you know?
The note we have here is $160,000 from FY18 and FY19 that was budgeted. So those would be monies that weren't spent that would be not necessarily carried over, but he wants to continue with the automated flow project for 320, so $400,000 for automated SCADA system, full SCADA system for the city.
Okay, so it was in 18 and 19. It's not in our book. Do you mind giving me the 18 and 19 numbers again? I'll pencil them in.
The notes here indicate 160 from FY19.
Okay. It's not in our books, just clerical error, perhaps?
No, these are just notes here.
But I mean, the reason it's not in our book is maybe it's a clerical error?
No, it's not in your books, no.
Right. I'm just trying to nicely ask why.
Well, there are a lot of notes in here that as we put the budget together. I don't include all the notes in the tentative budget.
Well, this is historical, though. This isn't going forward. This is fiscal year 18 and 19, and they're
under that
the numbers
GL
are
account,
not here.
Look at that.
So
52.
It's not something that needs to get too hung.
Yeah, I think they, as I recall, I think they were requested but not funded.
If I could make a suggestion, I think that Councilmember Adams has some really good questions, but since we're going to be having each department head come in, perhaps it would be beneficial to save, so we have those questions ready to ask the department heads. And it might be nice to forward your questions on to Shane so that the department heads are ready to answer your questions. This way we're not up. Would that be acceptable?
I'm about done. Just
Okay.
if we could jump. Storm drain has another one of $120,000 for capital equipment. So some of that's probably the dump trucks, right? I think you said about 60,000 of that.
The note I have here, funds to include purchase a new camera system, light duty pickup for the SWIP inspector, and sharing the cost of the fuel pump vehicle from streets. So,
The cost of the what was the last one?
It says fuel/pump vehicle from streets.
So a couple, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe somewhere else?
As I recall, I don't think it's in stormwater. I think it was just has general fund and water.
All right, thank you. All right, any last comments?
No.
All right. Thank you for good questions. Let's go to call to the public. Thank you for waiting for so long.
Thank you.
Richard Proctor, please.
I'll have to wake up.
Understandable.
Guys, Ben Carson got himself in the notes again. He put a rule out that we can no longer have head of house guys in illegal aliens. We've got people on the streets that are American citizens. Let's stop giving their homes to illegal aliens. So he's cut that out. And he's attempting now to cut out even having illegal aliens when there's at all in homes that are subsidized. Just thought I'd bring that up. Now, here's an interesting thing about the Electoral College, which, by the way, we're not using properly at all, but the way we are using it, notice this information here. How does it benefit the country? There are 3,141 counties in the United States. Trump won 3,084 and Clinton won 50. New York State, Trump won 46 and Clinton won 16. Clinton won the popular vote by $105 million votes. I got money mixed up there. 105 million votes.
1.5 million.
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Yes.
In the 5 counties that encompass New York City, Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Richmond, and Queens, Clinton received well over 2 million more votes than Trump. So, those 5 counties comprise 319 square miles. If you have a country that encompasses almost 4 million square miles of territory, it's ludicrous to even suggest that an area of 319 control every college is for the way we're using it today. It's not proper, but that's what it's for today. We've got to be behind these kinds of things. We've got to understand them before we lose all of the benefits that we have. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bo Bell, please.
Hi. I would like to thank the Councilman Adams for asking for clarifications for drawings, the City Council and the staff for their support, also Adams' extra support to the neighbors with the Shepherd Lane project. We saw great value with neighbor input, wouldn't be where we are today without Adams and neighborhood proof of the value and the value of input. Would we have ended up with a better project with earlier involvement? Josh mentioned due to time, they opted for just one scenario. We would like to make sure that we have a study for the results for the traffic on Shepherd Lane, assurances of neck downs, like the street where they bottleneck, and then itemized list for storm drain fees and what they cover. As for Councilman Adams' questions on, we have 600,000 shipping containers that come into the United States every month. 400,000 are left behind. Maybe use shipping containers, be a cheaper alternative to them, what you guys have planned. They could be moved very easily, and you can sell the shipping containers off in the future. And I'm the founder and CEO of It's a peer-to-peer online platform. So I represent in a business to where I only need a computer. I don't have customers coming. But with share economy platforms, and I'm not the only platform in that category, you have different people that rent out boats, RVs. There's not really a clear explanation for business licenses in those categories. I haven't found them, so that'd be something to look at, and I'd be happy to sit down with someone. And then marketing materials for that same action 5C. With flyers, I get 5 out of 100. That's my response. So if you're hitting 4 houses, probably not going to hit them. Signs, I've been getting calls daily, so that's just my history. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shelley Costley, please.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm from the Shepherd Lane. Traffic on our street, and the presentation that we were given on this improvement was to improve safety, and I have yet to see anything approaching statistics showing that putting in curb and sidewalk and actually making the street look wider will improve safety, not just of pedestrians, which I think are who you're targeting for safety, putting in sidewalks, but I'm talking about the other users, me pulling into my driveway, and people going 40 miles an hour down our street because it's a big, wide street are not going to necessarily be influenced by stripes. I think what has been neglected in the plan that I just printed off today is areas of narrowing to actually make people slow down. And on 350 East, where the Forsbergs live, and I don't know if any of you have been down our street to look at it, of residents on our entire street until you get down where it turns into Sunset. She has to walk across what now looks like a 4-lane street on this proposed plat, and if we were to put the bump outs there, it would make it narrower so she could actually cross that street safely. So I would like to see those, what I'm calling bump outs. If you don't know what I mean, I don't blame you, but I can answer that question if you have any questions for me. And I think Councilman Adams have a voice. Do any of you have any questions for me on that?
We actually don't do
the interaction.
Yeah,
thing.
we'll do that after if you'd like.
All right.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Okay. All right. Let's go to council member reports. Public Works.
Nothing to report this evening.
Community Development.
Be working, Ben. I don't want to spend a lot of time, but it's interesting. Just want to say for our fire department and what they're doing on, and some of the mitigation that we're doing. It's incredible. I appreciate them so much, and I think we have a high potential this year of wildfires, and they're on top of it. I just want to tell the fire department how much I appreciate them, and they take this very seriously, and so this is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Parks and Rec.
Yes, very exciting month. So 2 weeks from now is Pioneer Park grand opening, May 16th. The ribbon cutting ceremony last Saturday, we had a service project to get it ready. We had really overwhelming turnout. It was fantastic. Planted trees and shrubs, and 2 weeks from today. To that, and we have a pickleball tournament going on right now. That's fantastic. Our community put together, sponsored. It's a great way to raise money as well. So look forward to that. I'm actually playing in it tomorrow, so wish me luck. Gonna need it. And our youth city council is accepting applications right now. If you have anybody interested, have them contact me. We have 7 spots open to be filled, so we're working on that pretty heavily right now. So yeah, lots of stuff going on.
Wonderful. Thanks. Anything for Power?
No, nothing to report for POW. It's still in session for the next month or so that's going well. One thing that I would like to add real quick, City Manager Shane Scott, myself, and Councilman Adams attended the Utah League of Cities and Towns mid-year conference in St. George last week. Absolutely fabulous 3 days. So I learned a lot and got a lot of exposure, and it was a good time.
Councilmember Adams went to.
Oh, shit, or crap, sorry. Did I really say Councilman Adams? I meant Councilmember Page.
I believed.
Wow.
I know,
I
sorry.
believed it.
I can't believe I said that.
You really did.
I just came up.
Either
I know.
Crushed. You're so disgusted.
No, no. Anyway, so I was rambling on. I was wondering, what's everybody laughing at me? Well, that's the reason why. So anyway.
City manager.
Mayor, I had my last school communication meeting with area community councils and principals, and the last one of the school year, this just today. And they are looking forward to hearing from Mr. Belknap next week about, he's presenting his department generally, but also presenting a sidewalk priority plan next week, or sorry, 2 weeks. So that's something for you all to look forward to if you love sidewalk priority plans as much as I do.
I do. All right. And then we will reconvene as the Municipal Building Authority Board.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it is unanimous. We will reconvene after a 5-minute break.
Fantastic.
Sorry about that slip up of the names there.
I fell for it.
I was just going with it. So. Anyway,
Davis Tech,
we had a good time down there. That's so. But whoever it was, that was down there. Yeah, maybe it was such a good time I couldn't remember when I was down there. But,
Oh, that's just.
we're on. Why?
Yeah. Thanks for that warning.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sorry. Okay.
So what I love about you is
Whatever.
All right.
All right,
We're going
here
to
we
get
go.
back.
All right.
Great.
You guys have joke awards?
Because I believe it. No, it's just how you set yourself up for that.
These chairs out front of the table, it's a little bit like, remember the Crocodile Dundee? Who was it that used to, or maybe the real one that used to wrestle with an alligator?
Yeah. Steve Irwin. Yeah. That's right.
I could literally work nonstop, 100 hours every week, forever, and always have more to do.
It's all about land use, I'm telling you. What are we waiting on? We're just putting something out?
Excuse me. Your brother lost it.
So you got a lot of people that go to the hotel room or
He's like in charge of it.
It's just a little more later, sorry. Time passes too fast. A lot more to do.
Get an Airbnb sewer district.
I think it's part of this. What do you need?
I am not sure.
Do you need a print one then? Is that what you need? Okay, yeah.
Okay.
You need more?
Okay. One. We need more copies. One more.
I don't have
No, you can say.
It's still
Yeah.
I'd like to call the Kaysville City Municipal Building Authority Board to order. All right. I'm not going to read it all this time. Who's presenting? Is that Dean? Okay.
Or say ditto from the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. As we discussed earlier tonight, this is an action of the Building Authority, so you're serving as a separate entity, and the action tonight is to authorize the Building Authority for the issuance of bonds not to exceed $4,300,000. This is a parameters resolution for that, and as we discussed earlier, process in July or August. This initiates the process. After the action tonight, there will be public notice for 2 consecutive weeks, and then there will also be a public hearing on June 6th regarding the issuance of bonds. So this really begins the process.
Okay, thank you. And any board member questions on this?
No.
Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion that we approve the
resolution
for the.
I'll second.
It's been moved by board member Barber and seconded by board member Page. Any comments? Okay, let's go to a vote. Board member DeCare.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously.
No.
4 to 1.
Oh, forgive me. I'm so sorry.
Maria got it,
Motion
we're good.
passes 4-1. Thank you. Any other building authority business? All right. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.